Okay, while we're covering the Constitution, we're going to take a look at how the president is elected and also how the two branches of government check one another. Or sorry, three branches of government check one another. Okay, let's take a look at the Electoral College of 2012. Okay, this is the most recent election. All right, you have the election between the re-election of Obama and Biden, and Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. You take a look at the electoral votes. So if you just look at the map and don't worry about the numbers, okay, just kind of look at the map, you may say, well, there are more red states than blue states. So what gives? Because if you take a look and remember from class, red represents the Republican Party, okay, and blue represents the Democratic Party. So why did President Obama win pretty heavily over Mitt Romney if there's actually more red states? Well, it goes to population. All right, and like states like California, Texas, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, these are your big populated states, our state of Illinois, and they have a little more say-so than these little states here like Montana, even though it's huge, and Alaska, huge. They don't have as many votes as these states because of population. All right, it's called the Electoral College. So guys, the number of electoral votes per state is determined according to the most recent census. So every 10 years we conduct the census. So it's important to fill out your census so you know to be represented. All right. So these are your last three elections: 2004. Between George Bush and John Kerry. 2008 was President Obama's first election against John McCain, and then 2012, re-election against Mitt Romney. Okay, so why were the number of electoral votes per state the same in 2004, okay, and in 2008, but not in 2012? Well, your answer is the number of electoral votes would change because of the census. Some states were losing population, and some gained population. So you take a look at the Midwest, a lot of these states up here are losing population, and then down south, some of these states are gaining population. All right, so besides 2012, which presidential election will this current map that was based on the 2010 census still be used for? Okay, it will still be used in the 2016 as well as the 2020 election. But come 2022, we'll be using the 2020 census. So also you look at this map, you can see the states that lost population from one 10-year period to another, and the states that gained population, and everything in the gray is states that stayed the same. So New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Ohio, a lot of the Midwest is losing population, and then the South, Texas, also Washington, and then out west here in the desert states, we are gaining population. Okay, the presidential candidate that receives more than half of the electoral votes will win the election. So there's 538 electoral votes up for grabs. All right, so if you take 2 divided by 538, you'll need 270 electoral votes to win the election. You see how I did this map here. So if you need electoral votes to win the presidency, you must have more than half, so that's 270. So how do we determine how many votes a state gets? Well, you take your number of senators, and as you know, every state gets 2 senators, correct? And then you take how many people are in the House of Representatives representing your state, and that is based on population. Okay, so you take, let's practice here. So you have 2 senators, and Wyoming has 1 representative. They will have 3, because 2 plus 1 equals 3. So Wyoming gets 3 electoral votes. Actually, that's the lowest you can get. You'll at least have 3. All right, so if we'll take a look at the electoral votes. So we're going to see how many representatives do each of these states have. So if I have to do some math here, okay, Texas, now they have 38 electoral votes. So how many representatives would they have? Hopefully you'd say 36. Take a look at New York at 29. Okay, they would have 27 representatives. Tennessee at 9 because they have 11 electoral votes. And how about California out here, 55? How about Illinois? So Illinois would be, at 20, we would have 18. Okay, the electors from every state make up the Electoral College. The electors vote for president and vice president after the people vote. Okay, so you can take a look at, we show this in class, who your electors were from your state. And what it is, guys, is really, we have a winner-take-all system, and these people are chosen. They're supposed to vote the way that people vote. Sometimes they don't, but usually they do. And since you're in the state of Illinois, most of the time our votes do go to the Democratic Party. Not always, but they do. And it's a winner-take-all. So I know we're in southern Illinois, so we're not represented as much as the people maybe in Chicago, but it's the winner-take-all system. And it's always been that way. So what happens if none of the candidates receive more than half of the electoral votes? It's happened before. Okay. I'm sorry. So if no candidate receives at least 270 votes, it will go to the House of Representatives to choose the president. But what I meant to say was, if there's electoral votes, you can actually get more votes overall, but still lose the election. This has happened a few times. Okay, for example, in the election of 1876, Rutherford Hayes only got 4,034,000 votes, whereas Democratic candidate Samuel Tilden got more votes. He had 4,200,088. So what gives? Well, it comes down to the Electoral College. All right, even though he got less actual popular votes, Rutherford Hayes ends up getting the election over Samuel Tilden. Same thing happens in the election of 2000 when Florida's votes are up for grabs and they're having to do a bunch of recounts. And even though President Bush did lose the popular vote to Al Gore, he ended up getting the election, even though that went to the Supreme Court. Okay, so that's how we pick the president. All right, so now that we have a president, we also have Congress and we also have the Supreme Court. So how do they check and balance one another? So here is our president, President Obama. He says, yeah, I'm the president. It feels good to be the most powerful person in the world. Well, is he? Okay, even though he is the president, he is not king. He is not Emperor Obama. He is the president, and there are other branches of government that can check him. For example, you have the Judicial Branch. This is your Chief Justice, John Roberts, and he's talking to John Boehner, your Speaker of the House. Okay, John Roberts says, hey, John Boehner, does this guy think he had the executive branch has all the power? Well, John Boehner will reply, hey, John, I don't know, John, but I do think we ought to give him a check he'll never forget. And as you know in hockey, you can check people against the glass, so here's my analogy. So here's Obama skating. Boom, he gets checked. Was it necessary to check me that hard? Yes, it's part of our responsibility, says John Boehner. Okay, but still the president and the executive branch have checks of their own. Okay, so how does the executive branch and the president check Congress? Well, the president must approve all Congress's bills before they become a law. So if Congress wants to create a law, it has to go to the president to be signed. Okay? Now, the president can veto a bill. So if a bill, a wannabe law, goes to the president doesn't like it, he can veto it and send it back to Congress. That makes it very, very difficult to get that law passed. But it still can happen. Congress can override a presidential veto with 2/3 vote. Okay? Also, the Senate must approve all the presidential treaties. So if the president wanted to create a treaty with a foreign nation, it would have to be approved by the Senate. Congress can impeach the president with 2/3 vote. All right, and that's only happened twice in our history. And a common misconception with high school students and most people, if you impeach the president, that does not mean he's been kicked out of office. Okay, when you impeach the president, it means that proceedings have been put forth to try to get him kicked out, is what I mean. But so it will go to the legislative branch to decide if the president should be removed from office. That's only happened twice in our history. Both times the president kept his job. The first time was Andrew Johnson after the Civil War, and then the second time was Bill Clinton in the 1990s with the Monica Lewinsky scandal. All right. Okay, how does the executive branch and the president check the courts, or the judicial branch? Okay, the president will appoint all federal judges, including Supreme Court justices. Okay, the Supreme Court can declare presidential actions to be unconstitutional. So the president can appoint a judge to serve on the Supreme Court, and that has to be checked by the Senate. But the Supreme Court now can declare presidential actions to be unconstitutional. So if the president was spying on you or something and the Supreme Court thought that it was unconstitutional, they can check that. The president passes a law like the Affordable Care Act where everyone has to buy health insurance whether you like it or not. The Supreme Court can go ahead and say that that's unconstitutional. Both of those cases, they've actually agreed with the president. All right, so we're jumping over to the judicial branch and the legislative branch. Okay, the Supreme Court can declare laws to be unconstitutional. For example, if the legislative branch were to pass a law banning the burning of the American flag out of disrespect, that law, if they wanted to pass that law and the president signed it into law, it could go to the Supreme Court and they might shoot that law down because it's an infringement on your First Amendment rights. You can still technically burn the flag, and that would be your freedom of speech being violated. Okay, the Senate must approve all presidential choices for judges. Okay, and Congress can also impeach federal judges. Lots to remember, I know.